Hey guys, this is Johanna and Travis, and we're here just to talk a little bit more about seeking God in the wait. So if you are interested in getting married and you're single and you've been single and you want to get married, what does waiting look like? How does it look to wait well? And what are some of the struggles along the way? And we just kind of want to share with you more about our story and what we've experienced along the way and what waiting looked like for us. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about Travis. Apparently this is going to be way more fun than the last one where I got to share a little bit.
You're fun, stop.
But yeah, so tell me a little bit about your a beginning of adulthood and your beginning 20s. You were engaged previously?
Yes, so I talked a little bit about that, and I think it was episode 2. Mm-hmm. So go back there and watch that if you haven't watched that one yet. So I'm just going to continue on my story from there, which basically after realizing that it was time to move on, it's time to leave that relationship behind and move on.
Which, by the way,
yes,
I just want to insert right here.
Insert.
You were 18 when you were engaged.
18, yeah.
He thinks he broke off the relationship, but actually, I was praying for the relationship to...
Very true.
Not praying for the relationship, but I was 14 at the time, and that's when I started praying for my future husband. I was encouraged to do it by one of my friends, and I just prayed. I remember sitting on my bed and praying, God, protect my future husband from whatever he shouldn't be doing right now. Little did I know you were engaged, ready to get married.
I always say the power of the righteous, and at that time, as she's praying,
prayer of the righteous.
Power of prayer of the righteous. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to look back to see that at that exact same time, God was stirring something in me to really just walk away.
Yeah.
And
Anyways, sorry.
Side note, beautiful side note. And here we are today. So from that point, after realizing that it was time to move on, there was an opportunity for me to move from my small little town in Central California up or down to Los Angeles. And I got involved in, I knew this big name Hollywood DJ. So when I was down there, there was just a whole bunch of opportunities for me to kind of walk into. So when I went down there, got into the whole celebrity scene, got into the whole, money and everything that comes with that.
That's why you moved to LA, don't you?
That's why I moved to LA, is to make money.
To become big.
To
become famous.
I didn't care about fame.
Not you, but that's why people.
I moved because I just thought it was cool. Coming from a small little town, you're like, oh, I'm moving to LA. And they're like, oh, really? You're moving to LA?
Cool.
How cool.
He's going to make it big.
And little did I know that I was just this little guy that was never going to make it big. Anyways, moved down there, got involved in that, and I just remember there was a just constant battle in that environment of make it big, do this, do that. You have to do these things in order to actually make it big, and it's crazy what I got involved into. And there was a point where I'm just like, okay, I'm hanging out with all these people, I'm doing all these things, making money. That's all great, that's cool, but there was an emptiness inside of me. Just a super emptiness that no matter what I did, I just felt like, it's pointless. It doesn't matter, I can have all the money in the world, I'm not happy, nothing's going right. It's just, there's nothing fulfilling, period. And that's when I actually am like, okay, well, I'm going to pick up the Bible again, I'm going to start reading it, and at that point, that's when my life started to change and radically transform. So I was still involved in that world. And I remember I was at a party at some, I won't say the name of it because I don't want to name drop, but it's just a huge mansion. And as I was out there, this girl approached me. She's like, hey, how do you want to be on TV? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, oh, you'd be perfect. Come on, join us. Let's do it. So I ended up actually going on a TV show. And it was about dating, of all things. It was back before we had online dating.
So it was like a reality.
It was a reality dating show.
Okay.
And as I went on this...
That never made it all too big.
It actually was pretty big.
Really?
Yeah, they just stopped it after a while. But anyways, I went on the show, and I tell you, I just had restarted my walk with Jesus.
Yeah.
So my convictions were high in everything that I like did or thought, like anything they would try to say or do. I'm just like, I just don't want to do this. Like I'm on national television. People are going to be calling me any second being like, what the heck are you doing? Right. And I'm just like, I just don't want to smear, like my conscience is strong. And so I just remember there's just everything that they did was like, hey, let's get naked, let's do this, let's get drunk, it's just everything in the world. And again, just starting to walk with Christ again, and I'm like, I can't do it. So they called me the nerdy boy, the pastor boy. So didn't have a good reputation, but I will tell you one thing, looking back, I didn't step the boundaries where I look back, I'm like, yeah, I got naked on national television. Like, no, that just did not happen.
Good. I'm glad not everyone can look that video up and be like, okay.
So, for the record, I followed my conscience. And
you paid your price. You were the nerdy boy.
I was a nerdy boy.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't mind. I'll take the nerdy boy.
The nerdy boys always win, right?
In the end, they do.
In the end, they do. And from that point, basically moved kind of out of the Hollywood scene, moved to the more of the beach area, and just ran into a church, started going to church, and that's when my life began to like radically change. And so I started to learn a lot of things about what it meant to be a man of God. Because at the time I didn't know, although I maybe have given my life to Christ at the age 13, like there was no, this is how you do things. There's no manual. Like I wasn't really reading my Bible a whole lot to kind of walk me through these things. So as I was going to this church, phenomenal church. I love that church. It's my home church still to this day, even though I don't live there. And it was just a lot of like, what does it look like to be a man? And through that, I started to learn that the more I picked up the Bible, the more I read, the more I started to understand what being a man of God is. Not just somebody that just, is a Christian, but like, what does it mean to really change your life to follow after Christ? So that's when I consider myself to become a disciple of Jesus Christ, not just a follower. But like Jesus says, follow me and do as I do. And that's what I wanted to do. And at that point, that's when, again, this is my 18 to maybe 19 to 30s, even up until we got married, right? This is me just trying to figure it out. And the more I walked with Christ, the more I realized that I just didn't want to waste my time. I didn't want to waste my time on just relationships that weren't going to go anywhere, right? So I became very selective. Yeah, I'll say at the time I was probably a little shallow, people used to call me, because of what I wanted. But I was learning, right? I was learning like, hey, this is what I want. My criteria is it's got to be beautiful. It's got to be this and worldly and everything about this, and this. And it had really nothing to do with Christ. So as I was walking, it began to change more of like, yes, I want to find a beautiful wife. And I did. But at the same time, like, what is her character like, right? And I know there was times like where I would just, talk to a girl and see if it would work and be like, hey, let's just try this for 6 months. You're cute. Like, let's see if we work. And from that point, it's like, okay, well, 4 months in, we realized we're just not on the same path. But doing it in a way that was respectful, not doing anything too crazy, not going too far. You can leave a relationship knowing that you've done your best and you didn't disrespect.
So you can
the
date
woman.
well.
You can date well, and that's what I had to learn.
In a healthy manner, not like, hey, let me take everything I can possibly and then leave you stranded. Right. But it can be an enrichment, even if it doesn't end up in marriage. Right.
I mean, there's a lot of benefits to dating. But my understanding of dating became less of, hey, I just want to do this because I need somebody in my life by my side and I don't care who it is, to like, man, this next step is marriage. Like, is she who I want to marry? So the end game was different. It wasn't just like what I can get out of it. It's like, hey, I want to live the rest of my life with this person. And if it's not going to work out, it's okay to be like, hey, it's not going to work. That was perfectly okay. Because you don't want to jump into a relationship too soon just because you want to be married, which again, at 18, I just wanted to be married. And then realize, hey, I got to live this out for the rest of my life. Like, that's just not good. So again, these were the transformative years where I was starting to understand and realize what dating looked like.
Did anybody teach you these things, or was it really just like...
Well, there was a book called I Guess Dating Goodbye. But I think, again, I know that book, it's a lot of...
It's pretty controversial.
Very controversial. But I will tell you one thing I did learn, not only from that, but there were people in my life that I would watch their story and be like, hey, like, this is so cool. You guys have such an amazing relationship. Like, what did you guys do?
Yeah.
And even, talked a little bit about boundaries. There was one guy that he was a missionary down in Mexico. We called him the Godfather because he was just awesome. And he told me his story. And he told me he didn't even kiss his wife until the day of marriage.
Cool.
And that inspired me. I'm like, I didn't understand why at the time. I'm just like, this is cool. Like, I would love to give my wife my first kiss.
Yeah. On your wedding day.
On our wedding day, when you say I do.
Yeah.
And that was part of the inspiration. Later, I come to find out, like, it was more beneficial because of purity and all those things. But at the time, still being young, I'm like, that's awesome. Like, who do you know that hasn't kissed their wife before saying I do?
Before she becomes your wife.
Like, it's unheard of.
It's like the total opposite of what this world does.
Right. Yeah. So in that, again, like throughout, there's so many pieces to my story to where it's like, what did I want to follow after? What did I want to mimic? What was my purpose? Right? Again, this is where seeking God in the wait comes, because I wanted to be married. I had been engaged at 18. So it's not like I didn't want to be married. I wanted to be married. Right. But I started to learn that the more you seek God, the more you start to realize what is important and what you seek after in marriage. And in that, again, I'm human. Along the way, I'm sure I've made a lot of mistakes, but at the same time, like, I didn't want to compromise. And I think that was big for me. Didn't want to get involved with people that was going to be like, okay, well, there's no possible chance of us ever being together for the rest of our life. And in that, so it's just, kind of figuring that out. Like,
so how do you know, is this someone I want to date, or this isn't someone I want to date? Like, how, without dating them?
Well, first of all, are they cute?
Okay, so there has to be
I'm a guy, right? It's like every guy, even women want to find a cute guy too.
Yeah.
So
attraction's an important factor initially.
Well, they got to get past step one.
Right. Initially attracted to this person. But then, how do you kind of feel out a situation without being like, hey, I'm really interested in you, So, like, without leading someone on.
Right. And that's the hard part, because especially in the church, when you just hang out with a girl, a lot of times they think, hey, you want to marry them? Right. Which isn't the case. Yeah. Like, sometimes it's just like, I want to get to know you as a friend or as a sister. Yeah. And so that's tough. So I think that the main thing is just being really clear with them, not leading a woman on just for the sake of leading them on. So for me, I never really went on dates. I never went on just one-on-one dates. Like, I wanted to see who they were around their friends, because in that, like,
that's where you're gonna.
They're gonna be real. Character. Like, they're gonna get called out from their friends if they're like, "Why are you acting like a fool? Like, why are you acting like you never act like this, right?" Right. So to me, that was important, to seeing who they were, not only with their friends but with my friends. And most of the time, like, the church circles are pretty like small, so everybody kind of knows everybody. Knows each other. So I'm always willing to be like, "Hey, like, let me talk to your friends. Who are you?" But I think for me, I put such a high standard on marriage that I didn't even really get that far with many. I think between that, I actually dated less than a handful of people. So it wasn't that many. Just because I'm like, you're not, there's nothing here. So I'm not going to force something and make something happen.
You weren't feeling like that connection with that person.
Right. So yeah, that's, so.
So you're in your 20s. You obviously want to get married. But you don't want to jump into anything again, because you've done that. And you're growing in the Lord. What did it mean? between 18 and 37. That's when we met.
Hey, now, come on.
That's a substantial amount of time.
It's like the 40-year-old virgin movie. At least I did it before 40, right?
You did get married before.
It's...
But even if it was after 40, so what? Like,
yeah, no, it's...
You're waiting for a long, long time.
Right, and here's where we'll go into...
How are you seeking God in that?
Here's where we'll move into the next episode. We'll be talking about like what we did while we were waiting, right? So for me, in the meantime, haven't quite reached the mission field at this point. I'm still living in Los Angeles, working at the church. But for me, I didn't want to just wait around and waste my life. So I feel like there was a few opportunities that I jumped on that were awesome opportunities. Like one was going back to school for ministry. So if I would have just been like, hey, like, this is great, I'm just going to sit around and wait for a wife, like, I would have wasted my life. So looking back, actually my pastor once said this, he said either, in 4 years, you're either going to be 4 years with a degree or you're going to be 4 years without a degree. So while you're waiting, it's like, what are you going to do? So I think that really encouraged me. So it wasn't just waiting, and that's why we don't just call waiting for the next thing to come in life, right? It's seeking God in the wait. So being active about what we do and how we do it. So for me, how did that look? Well, school was a big one. Like, hey, I'm going to go to school. Didn't want to go back to school, but I felt like God was saying, here, let me open the door and you walk through that. Being actively involved in ministry. That was huge. Like, there's opportunities where pastors left and nobody rose up to lead young adults groups. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not just going to sit around and do nothing. Part of me was probably a little selfish, being like, hey, maybe I can find something.
Scout out the girls.
Maybe a woman will show up to this group while I'm leading it, and that will be her.
And that's fine.
And that's fine.
And that would have been
right.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm human. I had my selfish desires and reasons to do things.
And
but
I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I mean, meeting someone in youth group or as you're leading is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It's better than meeting them at the club or,
Right.
wherever. But I think, yeah.
Right.
So
but
you're involved in ministry.
Yeah. So I think the key thing is as we are waiting for that next point in life, not just waiting passively, but we're waiting actively. Like, and how does that look for every single person? It's going to be different. Like for you, it's totally different. For me, it looked like getting plugged into the church or bringing ministry to coaching. Like influencing and impacting kids' lives through the game of soccer.
He was a soccer coach.
But I mean, again, that can look different in so many different ways. But for me, it was really saying, God, what do you want me to do while I'm waiting? Right? And what you find is, like, as you're doing these things, you start to grow in character. And God's actually working in you as you're waiting, and at the same time working in that other person while they're waiting. So it's kind of, God is at work in tandem as you are, waiting for the next big time. So,
I mean, you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting.
And waiting.
Did you get discouraged?
And waiting. Of course. If I'm honest, here's what it is. It's, you look at yourself and I'm like, I'm not a bad looking guy. I'm not like a horrible friend. I'm not like,
right.
So, I mean, I'm a catch. I'm saying that humbly, like, so God, why do I see all my other friends getting married, but not me? Like, what am I doing wrong? So I think that's probably one of the bigger battles that you deal with is like this idea of, well, everybody else is getting this blessing of marriage, and how come there's nobody even on the radar. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. So there's a battle with that. There's a struggle with that. But again, going back to, well, what do you do with that? You trust God that He's at work, and you continue to say, God, your will be done. Your timing is perfect timing. And when that opportunity arises, I will step into what you've called me to. But until then, I'm just going to seek you in this wait. So yeah, it's a lot. So let's do this. Next episode, we'll talk a little bit about the mission field, because I know we both struggled a lot with our singleness in that because you're away from everybody, you're in the middle of nowhere. For you, Africa, for me, New Zealand. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the next episode. But in the meantime, guys, we're just so thankful. I said to be continued as always, but we're thankful that you are joining us on this journey again.
Yeah.
And we just want to say we love you, and we'll see you next time.
Ciao.